Excellent. Good evening, everybody. I'm Stesha Brandon. I'm the Literature and Humanities Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library. And as we begin tonight, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, these are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people, and we honor their elders past, present, and future, and thank them for their stewardship of this land. Welcome to tonight's program, which is presented in partnership with Elliott Bay Book Company. We're so grateful to our series sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation and the Seattle Times for their generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everybody in our community. I have just a couple announcements before we get started. Our friends at Elliott Bay Book Company have copies of both Steph and Bree's books on this table right over here. You probably saw them as you came in. As I mentioned, if you need to exit the auditorium during the event, you use that door to your right. And then after tonight's conversation, there's going to be time for questions from the audience. So we'll be running mics, and because we want to make sure everybody has time to get their books signed, we'll have time for some questions, but not everybody will necessarily get a chance to get their questions answered, but that's okay because you can get your book signed and ask it then. Okay? So, and finally, I wanted to mention that we are interested in hearing from you. Many of you received a survey as you came in, and if you can fill that out toward the close of the event, we would really appreciate it. And since I have your undivided attention, I'll also just take a minute to explain how the signing line will work. So those of you that want to get your book signed will, there is a little green sign on that wall to your right that says signing line starts here. The line will go up the stairs. I apologize now for the awkwardness of that. If you have an issue with mobility that will prevent you from lining up on the stairs, just give me a heads up and we'll make sure to integrate you into the line on the floor because sometimes stairs can be a little awkward. So anyway, now it is my pleasure to welcome Kate Heacock from Elliott Bay Book Company, who is going to introduce tonight's speakers. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, everyone. As Desha said, I'm Kate Heacock. I'm the readings manager at Elliott Bay Book Company. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight to celebrate the paperback release of Steph Jagger's Everything Left to Remember and Brianna Madia's Nowhere for Very Long. I started working at the bookstore last year, and that was a time when people were still really figuring out if and how they wanted to gather in spaces. So it made it really hard to predict, how many people were going to show up to an event. And I'll just say that I was so thankful to all of you because y'all showed up in such a high amount for these authors that we actually had to move the event out of the store into the library. So, and also thank you to the library for hosting us. Everything really worked out perfectly and I appreciate it. But I think all of you showed up and you gathered here tonight because these books really spoke to you. These authors wrote about their acute experiences in ways that touched on the universal: grief, loss, and the need to find healing on an open road or in nature's embrace. So thank you both to our authors and to all of you for showing up and reminding us why we host these book events. I'll keep things short since we want to be sure everyone has time for this signing. So I'll just go ahead and introduce our guests tonight, and then they'll come out and join you in conversation. All right, first up, we have a woman defined by motion. Brianna Madia bought a beat up bright orange van, filled it with her two dogs, Bucket and Dagwood, and headed into the canyons of Utah with her husband. Nowhere for Very Long, an instant New York Times bestseller, is her story of exploration, of the world outside and the spirit within. Brianna can be found on her wildly popular Instagram page, which now includes a subscription to her work as a writer. We're very excited to have the paperback of her book here tonight. And she'll be joined by Steph Jagger, who is the author of two books. Her first, Unbound, a story of snow and self-discovery, chronicles her world record-breaking ski adventure. Her second, Everything Left to Remember, is a mother-daughter love story set against the backdrop of memory loss and the nature of deep remembrance. It's also one of the Seattle Reads books right now on the list of further recommended books that is an annual list that the library puts out, which is also another great kudos to her. Steph is obsessed with feminine initiations and rites of passage, and her work as a writer, coach, and facilitator can be found at her website, stephjagger.com. Please join me in welcoming Steph and Brianna to the stage.
The dogs are not here. I'm sorry.
Is that on? Yes, it is.
It is. It doesn't sound like it's on here.
The dogs are with mine. There's a huge house dog party
Oh yeah.
at my house. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out and for joining us. We are thrilled and honored to be here with you all tonight. You know, this is like act 2 because we got to do a book event last night on Bainbridge Island, which was so great. And we didn't have an agenda or a plan going into that. And so we just kind of flung it and wung it, and it was so great. And so we're going to do the same thing again tonight. The only thing we decided in advance was that I would be captain and you'd be Tennille. Are we too young for that joke? Are we too young for that joke?
I refer to her as my as Mother Goose. So any direction she steers us is the right direction.
If I'm Mother Goose, she's a phoenix. It is on, but you have to play the trumpet, remember.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so we are going to start. There's so much difference in our lives and our work, and there's also a ton of overlap. And I think one of the most obvious places of overlap is nature, is public lands, which is kind of the reason we wanted to get together, because next week is National Park Week, Public Lands Week, and the simultaneous release of the paperbacks. The other is kind of the crossover of, I think, what the discussions we've had around femininity and what we learned and kind of inhaled and were taught as young women, that we both, in different ways, really, really push against and attempt to shift and crack and break and move in our adult lives. And so I'm going to read a little bit, from both of these for a crossover.
Perfect.
Okay, we're going to start. We're going to start with Bree's book. It's been a long-standing joke that I was birthed into the world carrying the wrath of the women before me, who were seldom allowed to be who they truly were, who were punished and guilted and shamed into silence. This is the next book. Did all of the women in my family keep things inside of themselves, away from others? What else did we know and not say? What else did we feel and not give voice to? Were we all, each and every one of us, splitting off from ourselves, drowning out the voices of our sadness and fear with ebbs of salt water? Were we all using shame to muffle the sound of our cries? So there's obvious overlap in the work. Now, on the way over here tonight, we drove over on the ferry, and we immediately boarded the ferry, and we were sitting in the car, and both of us unbuttoned our pants. And
this is a 30-minute journey. We're not moving.
Right? We unbuttoned our pants, and she said, "Let me read you something." And she read me this passage from Emily Ruskovich's an essay that she wrote. And both of us were like crying. So you just have to imagine, like, of course, these are two authors. Like, of course, their pants are undone and they're crying about words in a car. Like, how typical is this? And this was the quote that really got me, that I think ties this up and will be a segue into the first question I have for you. So the quote that she read from the essay was, trying to teach her what would break her own heart to learn. In all of the ways that we try and teach little ones what is eventually going to break their heart to learn that they were taught. And so, can you tell me your experience of, one, what you were taught that now breaks your heart to know that you were taught, and two, how you've attempted to shift that lineage, that pattern of women in your life? We're starting with the big ones.
So I feel like it's not so much what I was taught. I mean, I guess, but I talked about this in my book, that when I was a teenager, there was this very poignant moment where my mother was trying to explain to me possibly why my father no longer wanted to be in my life. And she said, I think your dad is just scared of you. And there was a part of me, even then at 14, 15, that was like, that's badass. But then there was the other part of me that was like, immediately, well, I'm like, well, that's wrong then. Like the strength, everything that I have portrayed up to my very limited 15 years of life has been abrasive, aggressive, intimidating. And if your own father is afraid of you, that sort of sets you up for an interesting. So I tried really hard to like channel the other side, the side that thought that was kind of badass. Just in sort of pressing forward and recognizing that other people's inability to categorize me, to, you know, the whole like you're too much or are you not enough, that was sort of a motivation for me for a very long time to sort of live between those two things, like being aware of the power of being, what do I say, an angry woman. Oh no, what did they say? What did they say? A deeply unlikable woman. But yeah, it was almost like immediately, it was like a very early introduction to like the patriarchy of just like, wow, we are like really like full grown men. And this goes like beyond my father, are like very frightened by a woman. And especially when they can't really tell the source, like she just like came in swinging. Where did that come from? That was very intimidating. And so I tried to sort of like take that, harness the power as opposed to the fear of it and run with it.
You know, there's another place of overlap that I think has to do with this, because when I first read your book, when it first came out last year, I noticed this theme that was kind of this ebb and this flow and this rocking back and forth between found and not found, seen and misseen, visible and invisible. And there's an overlap for me in the ways that we show a part of ourselves and then not a totality. And that is such an overlap with what I wrote about with seeing the women in my family kind of split in two, and not having the totality of them available. And, you know, there's much in my book about Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive decline. And I first read, saw the word remember spelled R-E-member, remember, and heard a myth that associated it with the idea of bringing all of the dismembered parts of ourselves, the seen and the not seen, the visible and the invisible, like remembering our whole self. And I think we had an amazing conversation today, speaking of like unbuttoning our pants and driving over. We had an amazing conversation today when we were walking on the beach and just talking about how nature and how being wild has allowed us in our individual ways to kind of come back into that wholeness and that totality. So can you talk about how you've used nature, how you've used Mother Nature, how you've used the hardness of that and also the nurturing of that to kind of come into a feral sense of your wholeness?
You word questions so beautifully, it pisses me off. Like, let me quickly write down the way you worded that. I think that I do feel that there are two very sort of like polar sides of me in all things, and that I am, and I've always said this, I'm either on or I'm off, meaning I am like hiding fully feral, naked, crouched in a canyon somewhere.
That was me on the beach today. Don't
Yeah,
judge.
I know. I mean, that's why, yeah. And so I feel like that balance is, there's no expectation of it in nature. Like nature doesn't give a shit about me. Like, much of all of our worlds, like you have to be egocentric. That's how you like survive. You have to focus on yourself, your safety, how you're feeling, who you're sharing with, who you're spending your time with. For me, I am such like a people pleaser. I am so like needing validation and, thanks Dad. But like when I'm out in nature, it's very difficult, but that has nothing to do with me. Like it's not like it's impossible to say that like, the weather turned to shit while I was out planning on having a great day, and that has everything to do with me.
Right, because you were just too much that day.
Yes, exactly. You are too aggressive, and you're too that it's just like nothing has taught me to let go of expectation, of feeling like I'm having a good day, so the weather should be good. Like that's just all of that is removed. And yet at the same time as it being relatively unpredictable, which is like if there was a person in my life who was very unpredictable, I would be very hesitant of that. But then on the other end, it's so cradling and comforting, and Mom Nature never asks for anything in return.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the things that I think looking back about Everything Left to Remember was this idea that I didn't know it at the time, but like what is the container that has the vastness, the spaciousness, a breadth of space that can hold my mother and I through this experience. And it's the only, like there's no other mother bigger than my own. And at the same time, it's like, this is a place that I can go, that I can feel simultaneously, like in the same moment, so small and so insignificant, but also my most kind of colossal, powerful self. And I think there's a crossover inside of that work for us.
Yeah, I mean, this is like one of my favorite topics to talk about in my second book, is just.
Second book. Did you guys all hear that? She just slipped that in there.
Thank you.
Next year.
Thank you. Next year, hopefully, fingers crossed. I gotta get my shit together. Anyways, yeah, just this idea of being again, like so like at odds. I was so devastated and broken and just terrified and isolated. And for whatever reason, the thing that made me feel like I was gonna get my sense of self back was like chainsawing a dead tree in a house. Or just sort of like reverting to these very almost like primal behaviors of like taking care of myself it was like purely survival mode.
Well, this is like, and we've talked about this before. We've talked about this when you did your Vermont tour. We talked about this last night. It's one of my favorite topics, like that idea of like, oh, I've got to get back to my sense of self. Like I've got to get back to like finding out who I am and carving out my identity in the world. And that's a really hard thing to do inside of public spaces, right? And so we often do this privately or traveling or in nature. And I think this is one of the things that I noticed first. Well, it was an echo to me of Unbound. My first book felt very much like this. I saw this in your book, which is really dealing with archetypal maiden. And so for me, when I think about that archetype and the specific initiation that happens inside of that archetype that's critically important, it's a young person being able to say, I'm going to separate and reject and rebel from the familial and the familiar. I'm going to say, no, not that. I don't know what the yes is yet. I don't know what that is, but the rumbling that has to happen inside of that liminal space, inside of that unknown, to be able to be like, wait, who am I? If it's not that, and I don't know what that is yet, who am I? And I felt like you did such an unbelievable job of demonstrating to us the beauty and the messiness and the humanity inside of that maiden rumbling in this book. It speaks to the identity carving that happens when we're in nature. It speaks to the identity carving that is kind of impossible to do on the internet, that I'm not even going to go there tonight because I think there's more interesting things about you than the internet. And what I really want to know, and this is like maybe a future-ish question, maybe it's now because I know you're writing the book, is like, as you move into archetypal mother, as you move into the question that is less, what do I think of myself? What do I think? What does the world think of me? What is my identity? And more into the question of like, oh, I kind of know who I am. What will I allow to come through me? Like, what will be created through me? How is that shifting your life as a writer and your what you're wanting to create as an author?
So I was quite nervous. I mean, candid. How many of you here are in the clubhouse?
Clubhouse. Is there a secret handshake?
Not yet.
Okay, we're gonna get one.
The
Clubhouse
so this
is the
is
subscription.
like clubhouse level stuff. But so I just handed in, or I'm like in editing process of my first draft for my second book. And my editor said to me, the first thing she said, she goes, "This is a darker Brie. This is a Brie that's seen some shit." And I was like, oh, good, that came across. But then she sort of, and again, it's like even deep in my head, I still have this like, oh, don't be an angry woman, but I'm fucking pissed. And so I wrote it that way. And it was just like so great to be like validated in that regard. And what she said was, there is this rage present, but it's not just like an aimless rage. It's a rage for, I did everything right. Like I did all this. And not even just like I went through the checklist. Like I was like, I know who I am. And my dad's been scared of me since I was a kid. And I'm so powerful and strong. And I know. And boy, did I get knocked to the ground. Just absolutely lost any sense of confidence that I was doing the right thing. And so I think coming back from that sort of like gleeful, rebellious maiden who's not really looking, there is no future, right? Like you're young, you don't think about what's coming next. Coming back in and sitting down to write a second book, it was very like, I actually, it's interesting, like this time, I felt like I really have something to say. And I know I had something to say in the first book. But this time I'm just like, man, like I feel like this is sort of culturally poignant in the sense that I think women are very tired of being told they can't do things, they shouldn't do things, that they need to be married and have a child and go through this, and this. And I feel like one of my favorite things ever was when I built that fucking shed. Someone sent me a message and said, I feel like you built that shed for women everywhere. And I was like, kind of laughed it off, but I'm like, that has never left my mind. And there was something about, I think it was something about where I was in my life and was trying to be as public as I was comfortable with how horribly I was doing. But then still just trying so hard to survive and like trying to prove something. And it's almost like it's terrible, but it's like I said to her earlier today, it's like when you hear someone's chainsawing a tree or building a shed, we picture a man, right? Like in your mind, that's sort of, at least where, I don't know, maybe I was raised in more toxic masculinity land, but I felt like sort of I became this like protector. I didn't have a husband anymore, didn't have a father. And so I was like so grief stricken and yet going through these like manual, like it's step 2, step 3, because that doesn't exist in our lives, right? There's no like IKEA page, turn it, next step. And I hated every step of it. And it's still now my most favorite thing I've ever done. That fucking shed.
Okay, so I want to go a little bit deeper into this like maiden mother transition because, and I've not thought about this before, but I experienced a little bit of this with the difference between Unbound and Everything Left to Remember. Is like the younger author and writer in me was really excited about shaping her own narrative. I think it's a critically important power to have in the world. I think that's, I wish that for everyone, and we have a long way to go in helping a lot of people be able to shape their own narratives. But as a young author, I felt like this is just freaking amazing that I get to shape a narrative. The second book, and I think this probably happened to you partway through writing the first book, is that you come to
a
a
lot
point,
of shit happened partway through
right?
writing the first book.
Is that you come to a place where you're like, oh fuck, the narrative is shaping me. Like I've done enough of the work of the maiden of going out and carving the identity, and now I get to like come into the physical and embody this life, and I'm gonna have to surrender to stuff. I'm gonna have to like let stuff come through. There's gonna be unexpected stuff. This is now less about what I think and how much I'm willing to kind of surrender, not in the give up, but like surrender to the flow of this and let a narrative shape me. How do you dance between those two things? I am shaping the goddamn narrative, and there is stuff happening in my life that's shaping me as an author, as a writer, as a storyteller. How do you do that dance, or do you know you're doing that dance, or do you prefer the waltz?
This dance is new to me. No, I don't know that I have a good. I think
You're in it. You're in it.
yeah, I'm like actively. You basically just asked me like, how's your second book going? Yeah,
Does it feel I don't know if the right word is powerful, but does it feel more or less powerful than like shaping the narrative and or like having a narrative kind of come through and shape you as you write it? Like, does one feel easier, or does one feel more powerful? You know, is there a discernment of when you're doing one or the other?
So with my first book, I started writing it and it was going to be just happy times in the desert, overly saturated photos of, whatever. Like that was in my mind. I was like, that's what people want to hear about. And when I started writing it, it got pretty serious. And that just kind of came naturally. But I was like very worried about that. That was something I was like, well, this doesn't feel like it's in my control. So I don't want to, like, maybe I just delete this whole chapter. I don't include that. And now I sit down and I'm like, just send it out. Because I think that I know now that like I make sense of the things that have happened to me through writing. And I make sense of the world through writing. And I make sense of relationships with people and things that have happened in my life through writing. And so I have very much surrendered to the idea that like I don't know, none of us know what's going to happen in life, and I don't know what the hell my book's going to end up being like. Like I have a loose idea, but I start writing about something. I mean, it's like it's the metaphor, it's like nature. I mean, you start describing an everyday event for you while you're out camping with your mom, and then suddenly it's this like whole deep thing. And like, I don't personally think that way. I write that way.
Yeah, that is a really beautiful distinction. Like I don't this is not the narrative in my head. That's like
so beautiful.
Yeah, like that's not how I talk to myself throughout the day, but I get to step into a version of me. And I guess, this is another question that I think is an interesting part of the experience of being in nature as a young person. I look back on Unbound and I think that ski trip was before I had y'all, I had a BlackBerry. Anybody remember those? I had a BlackBerry for emergency use only. And I didn't have a phone, and it was probably social media had started, but I wasn't like hip enough to come on board with it. And so it was me alone in the world with strangers on ski lifts. And I look back at that and I think, well, that was a year-long moving meditation. That I didn't know this at the time, but that was me being able to find a flow state, a place where my capabilities as an athlete perfectly meet the challenge of the terrain in front of me. It's not too hard that I'm scared shitless, and it's not too easy that I'm bored. And I learned that in nature, and I learned that through physicality. That was able to, I was shocked and very pleasantly surprised that could translate as a skill to writing, that could translate as a skill to coaching and speaking and doing things unplanned and just being like, this perfectly meets the terrain that I'm comfortable with. And it has absolutely given me what I think of as a leg up in entering into a relationship with conscious grief as opposed to unconscious despair, which has been a lot of the journey that I've taken with my mother. Because I can sit for a prolonged amount of time fairly comfortably in a relative state of discomfort. So can you talk about how nature really, I think that you've experienced this in regards to your time spent in the outdoors, finding peace, serenity, awe, wonder, flow states, and how that helps you as a writer?
First of all, I will sit down at my computer and be like, that's it. I have no more thoughts.
It's like nowhere for
Tapped
very
out.
long. I'm out of this
And
page.
that's it. I go out and just walk around outside, and it's like, that's really the only place where it happens for me. And again, I don't.
Inside of some physical movement.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And not even that. It's mainly just like my dog's running around and no one else around. And I mean, it could be in, I don't know, the place that I take my dogs most frequently in Bend, not pretty. Like, it's not a gorgeous place. There's like shotgun shells everywhere. But just that like freedom, the nobodiness and the nothingness and the just like, it's just us. And I think that removes the pressure that I feel about, like, you know, at some point I'm going to have to present this to the world. But for right now, this is mine. This is ours, me and the little pack. And I think that's why it flows so easily, because, again, there's no expectation. There is only like, I mean, no one's looking over my shoulder. There's no deadline. Like, the world kind of disappears for me. And I know that sounds very like woo woo, but like,
I can go there.
yeah, let's, yeah, it's just so different than anything else that we have to deal with in our lives today. Just like the silence, just feeling like this is a safe place. I think that's what it is. It's safety. It's the feeling safe enough to, I mean, and that's what's so crazy is like, I have felt so much I have felt so unsafe in my own life throughout my life that I still feel unsafe to write a note in my phone.
This
sometimes.
is like, I'm going to like potentially steal a line from Sue Monk Kid. I think this is one of hers. From the Book of Longings. I don't know if anybody's read that, but everybody should. You know, that idea that with what's happened with like the evacuation really of women from their physical bodies over time and millennial, even I would argue from our mental bodies not being allowed to go to school, our emotional bodies being called hysterical, our physical bodies, you know, ownership to somebody else, like just this pure evacuation means that actually being in spaces where the world disappears and that's all we've got feels like trespassing. And that's I remember Sue Monk Kidd writing about that, like that one of the characters in her book like trespassed freely through her own self. And I was like, that was my job from 20 to 30 something years old. And so when you think about, I love what you just said about when I get into that space, like the world disappears, and it all appears at the very same time. So I don't want to necessarily like go there because again, I don't think it's the most interesting thing about you, like into Instagram land. But that is part of our world. And so how do you balance, again, like as an author and a writer, like I need to create those spaces where I feel safe enough of myself to trespass in here and find the stories and pull them out and put them in a book and then, you know, move them into the world like Archetypal Mother does. And there's other stories that I'm going to share on Instagram. Like how do you know which route to go?
Well, I used to not at all. I used to just kind of feel like I owed everyone everything and share everything. But I'm so glad that you brought this to Instagram because I was like, shit, I got to go there. The trespassing thing. I have talked about this loosely in the sense that sometimes I think people's anger for me, they sort of disguise it as like you're trespassing on like public lands. Your dogs are ruining this. You've got to be in some place where what you're doing is not allowed. When I think really what they're angry about is that I am trespassing on some sort of like, women aren't supposed to do this. Women aren't supposed to go here. You're not supposed to have such confidence and such like, I'm just going to see what happens. I think it's like a mental trespassing into other people's worlds where they haven't considered.
Right, like, oh, you've made me have to think
Yes.
about this.
Yeah.
And that you trespass.
And that's a trespass to them.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It's interesting because I feel like, do you feel like you get a reaction like you made me think about this or you made me feel? Is it emotional or mental?
I think people often like it presents itself as mental because what are you going to do? Like record a voice memo and an Instagram comment of you just screaming or crying or like
Right.
it has to sort of come with this guise of like, well, here's why I think that here's why your existence is bothering me. But at the end of the day, my logical brain, my emotional part of me, which is so much the part of me is like, ouch. And then my logical brain is like, this is about you. It's not about me. It's about, yeah, I don't know. And I wish it wasn't so women based because I'm like, I'm just trying to.
I mean, this is like, I remember with my mom being like pissed that one, she never gave me her full story. Two, now she's forgotten it, me, everything along with it, and can't give me her full story. Like, how dare she? And I made it all about her and all about what she wasn't giving me, even though she gave me everything. And I was projecting all of my rage and all of and I was misplacing a lot of my rage about what she wouldn't give me, which she was absolutely like going back to the like what she was taught that would break her own heart, you know, and eventually coming to the place where, you know, this is the maturation, like that fierce anger of like, you didn't give me what I thought you should give me. That's maiden. And okay, we got to be there. And getting to the place in Everything Left to Remember where I was able to be like, oh, this is about me. This is about me gathering up all the parts of me and figuring out my story and how I'm going to move into remembrance of me and my story, not her and her story.
Well, it's interesting. I did a Q&A very recently just about like, you know, not having children. And I got so many responses of people saying like, well, my mother lived a certain way. My mother, has these expectations of me. My mother's going to be disappointed in me. And I feel like we take that very personally, but there is some, like, someone may have broken her societally, emotionally in the past. And so I think, and I know it's easier said than done, but I think one of the most important things that women can do is to show their mothers and their grandmothers what could have been. It's probably going to be startling to them in the beginning. But at the end of the day, like, I think that's our job as like women. That's like the best homage we could pay to the women who came before us, is to keep pushing and keep pushing for that individuality. And like, this is so random, but I feel the need to tell this story. I used to work at a software company in Salt Lake City, very, very, very Mormon. So they looked at me and they were like, what the fuck is happening? I'd come in with my large coffee and my tattoos. But I got really close with a lot of them. And my boss came in one day and he was like studying to be a bishop. Like his family, he had like 1,300 siblings or whatever. His mother had passed away. And I hope that wasn't offensive. His mother had passed away, and she was like 98. She, good old gal. She did work. And he and his siblings were cleaning out her closet, and tucked way, way, way in the back was this suede fringe jacket. And it literally gives me goosebumps. Like, I own this jacket, to fast forward. Like, so he came in to the office holding this jacket and comes up to my cubicle and was like, my mother died and we found this in her closet and none of my sisters want it. And I thought of you. And I was like, that could possibly be like my favorite thought that anyone has ever had, because it was more like, it wasn't just like, wow, this is fringy. I wasn't even as into fringe then as I am now. But for whatever reason, I think that jacket was like this representation of like, there was this part of his mother that at some point, whether she ever wore it or not, she bought it, she had it, she kept it. And it was so not, who they saw her as. It was this like little hidden thing. And to be given that, it's like one of my most treasured things. But I think like the message there is just like, women know themselves, and they have for a long time, even if societally they haven't been able to show it. And so it sounds so cheesy, but I'm always like, there is a fringe jacket in everybody's closet. Like, there is some part of you deep down that's got that like gut feeling that like knows what you need to do. And it's terrifying, right? Because it's like the only thing, it's got cobwebs on it. I mean, like, imagine being like, to me, it's almost like, imagine that someone says like, you can only wear this one thing for the rest of your life. You open your closet, you have all these like very safe options, these things that are very familiar to you. You have that thing, you own it, you know it's there. But if given the choice so starkly like that, it's like, is that what you're going to take? No, it's terrifying. It's very scary. And so like, to have this like courage of like being supported by other women, just kind of leaning into this, like knowing that there's so many women who have this thing that they want to share and they don't quite know how.
Well, it's the trespassing. Like, that woman, I'm imagining, like on a Saturday night, going into the closet and putting the jacket on and just being like, I'm going to turn on some, I don't know what would be, maybe Captain and Tennille, and just jamming. And
I pictured like a Fleetwood Mac.
Yes. And I feel like I feel like that goes back to that, and it doesn't, this is what was such a huge learning for me with my mom, is what is the difference between privacy and secrecy? You know, she had a lot of things that had shame that were secrecy, and she had other parts of herself that were private, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to, one doesn't have to share everything. Like, what's the difference between, we were talking about this from a storytelling perspective, like sometimes there's stories that just need to come up and out of our bodies, and that's good. And sometimes there's stories that then, you know, get written and shared in a book. And some, like, there's a big difference between writing the story and publishing a story. Yeah. I want to be cognizant of time because I know there's going to be a lot of people who want to buy all the books that are here from both of us and get them
This
signed.
is my first time seeing my paperback.
I know.
Like, seriously, they didn't send me any.
Right? So I want to open it up. I think we've probably got time for 2-3 questions. And so if you've got a question for either of us, for both of us, for one of us, maybe raise your hand and we will bring a mic to you. Does anybody have a question specifically about fringe or trespassing? We've got a question over here. Yeah.
Mike's kind of intimidating. I really liked in Brianna, in your book, the slot canyon scene, and I loved it. I thought the way you did it. I thought I tried to read it before going to bed, and then realized very quickly that I was no longer going to bed. I feel like you have every right in your next book to write about all the shitty stuff that has been frequent. However, the slot canyon stuff was just my favorite. Will we see more of that, or is your next book going to just be full rage? Which again is allowed.
My next
The
book
title
is
is
written in all caps.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up because my editor just said to me that, you know, I had presented in the first draft of my second book, it's like, you know, here's kind of how I'm envisioning it going. And she said, I want another 30,000 words by May 15th, no pressure. And she's like, zoom in, because very frequently I will talk about the things in my life as though they are like very normal, because to me they're very normal. And when I was writing that chapter, I remember being like, this is kind of like a lot of detail. I feel like I'm like going through to like describe. Everybody talks about that chapter. And so there's a lot of like my trip to Mexico by myself with the dogs. Like there's a lot of me sort of tackling similar situations. I haven't done that canyon again. So if you're not going to read about it again, because fuck that canyon, I will eventually do it. But yeah, there's a lot more of just like zoomed in on like me sort of like being kind of this like feral fighting my way through the environment around me. And also raging my way through the environment. Yeah.
I know this question wasn't directed to me, but I'm going to add something on. Is that like, you know, one of the things I think that's been so beautiful watching you move through the last couple of months is like there is a big difference between anger and aggression. And we need to, as women, embrace the totality of ourselves, which is going to include anger, and be asking ourselves, how do I utilize this very quick, this like holy feeling of boundary setting, which is anger, and differentiate that from aggression, which is I'm going to attack. So I just want to say, like, show us the anger. You know, that's a good thing for us to see. So that's all. And thank you for your question.
Thank you. Because I can be very aggressive. That's the nice thing about writing a book is like, you spit out all the stuff and then you're like, holy shit, I was going to publish that.
We've got one question up here. Yeah. We're doing it past the microphone. It's a new song by Captain and Tennille.
I love it. I want to say hi, Steph. This is like the Sun Femme contingent from Seattle, so we're so excited to see you. And Bree, we also read your book in our book club. But I was really fascinated listening to you talk about flow state for both of you, and this concept of, I think, as you move into the mother stage, feeling your anger and feeling your rage. And at least for me, they feel very much at odds, right? Like flow state feels peaceful and productive and calm. And then there's these moments of rage. So how do you balance that? How do you lean into them and like express both sides of them? Just curious.
Sure. So a flow state for me is kind of a mental, physical, emotional, spiritual like amalgamation that I cannot be in because I'm not like a young Buddha. I can't be in 24 hours a day, right? And so those are like practice. You could practice that in moving meditation. You could practice that in any meditation. You can practice it writing. There's a lot of different ways as an athlete, etc. When I talk about, rage or any emotion, I think about emotions as defined as emotions, energy in motion. So emotions are energy in motion inside of our bodies. And all energy wants to do, I don't know if there's any physicists in the room, but all energy wants to do is move from one form to another form. It doesn't want to stay the same. This wants to become something else, and one day it will. It's going to take a lot longer, probably, than this, but it wants to move from one form to the next. So if you think about any emotion in your body as energy in motion, all it wants to do is move through your body. How does energy, and by the way, when we feel a sensation in our body, we then just name it. And we often kick it up to our head and try and think it out, but that's not how it happens. How I deal with that when I feel sensations in my body, either pleasurable, uncomfortable, wild, all of these different things, is I think two things. Energy in motion, I'm going to meet it with a sound and a movement. So if I'm feeling an energy in my body that feels like rage, I'm not going to do this in the microphone because it's going to be big. It would probably be like, I'm actually going to do that in my house. If I'm feeling energy and motion in my body that feels exciting, my husband does an imitation of me. He's like, do your thing. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, there's a movement and a sound. And we're taught as little kids, this is one of the things that like breaks our heart, is keep yourself together, hold yourself together. Don't be so loud. Even with your body, don't be so big, don't be so much. And so we end up as women kind of being like, well, I don't know how to move emotions in my body because I just don't even know how to move my body. So I think that's how I would deal with that, is asking myself, what is a movement and sound that matches these sensations in my body? Flow states are a whole other, I bring out the crystals and the wings and the athletic gear and all that stuff. One more question here. Good.
No pressure. So it has to do with the idea of trespass, like that you are trespassing. And I have found that people make a lot of rules for themselves, imaginary rules, that you can't quit that job, you can't move across the country, you can't own 4 dogs in a van. And when you break one of their rules, that pisses them off. So do you feel like that is the rage that you're getting through the interwebs?
Yes. I think it's this interesting combination of like this feeling this internal rage from like, what happened with like my marriage and like my personal life, and then feeling like I was met with such opposition at every step from so many people who didn't know me. And yeah, I think it's because it's uncomfortable, because it's like I don't think we like to be presented with another option that we never considered. Especially if you're caught. It's one thing if you like go to a retreat and you're like, I want to open my mind. But like just sometimes somebody just existing, minding their damn business, being like, hey, like this is what I'm doing. If you have clung so tightly to these ideas of what can and cannot be done, the reaction is going to be confusion. And when we're confused or we don't understand something, a lot of times anger follows that. Yeah.
If we've been starving ourselves from the things that we really want, and we see someone else just gorging on that fucking hamburger, that's a painful, painful reckoning that is much easier dealt with in the short term with projection. And this is, we talked about this a lot last night. Like, if we are not actively digesting and integrating our lives, which is one of the reasons I love memoirists, because that's what we do for a living, is we kind of like, oh, what did I actually think about that? If we're not actively digesting our lives, we will devour the lives of other people, for sure. Yeah.
Stop saying all the best stuff.
She's like
Harder
putting
it
her
is to hang
notes
out with
in.
her.
Okay. We are going to move to, we probably have time for one. Was there one more question at the back? Yeah, let's, oh, hello.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
It's amazing seeing you both. And I want to say, speaking for everyone in this room and more, we are so grateful for you both sharing your very personal stories full of wisdom, magic, inspiration for us all. And I wonder, what is the motivation for you both to come out and share that with all of us and share your learnings, teachings, everything, what you are going through, sharing so publicly? What is the motivation for you both, instead of, keeping it to yourself or going through it personally? What is the motivation there?
I mean, we're both Capricorns. So no, do you want to answer first? I've got an answer for it, but you want to go first?
I want to go first because I know you're going to just bring it home. I've asked myself this quite a bit, and I feel like it's like this, I don't know exactly how to trace it, but it's this feeling of, mainly, I didn't want to feel alone. And the way that I interpreted and communicated with the world and made sense of the things that were happening to me was like I always say, like, when I was younger, I feel like, I think I was in like 6th grade, and I remember looking at my friend Abby and being like, does this seem fucking normal to you? Like, what? I just sort of felt like, no, but there's got to be all these things that nobody's talking about, because I feel them, and I know that I'm not like an alien. Like, I know that I've had just a regular ass upbringing, same as all these people around me. Why aren't we talking about these things? And so I think it actually stemmed for me from this place of like loneliness and not wanting other people to feel the way that I felt for such a long time. And so, yeah, for me, I'm just like, come on out here, be open, be weird. Anyone who says they're not, they're lying. We don't care about them. They'll say something beautiful.
No, I think it's a really good answer, because it's so like humanitarian. I don't have as much of a humanitarian answer. I think
blow us away now.
I think as a young person, I know this for sure. Like, I had a bucket list, like I had a motivation. And by the way, I was primarily motivated by fear, by proving, by not enoughness, etc. And I used that motivation to create a bucket list. I've got to do this much travel. I've got to write this many books. I've got to make this much money. I've got to have this many toys. I've got to, whatever it is. And that was a sense of motivation. But that really was a fearful and young and egoic. And I think when I finished the ski trip, I had a real reckoning, because I didn't understand how I was going to kind of top what I did in any way, shape, or form. And what I did didn't give me what I thought it would. I thought it would prove my enoughness, like, once and for all. And it didn't. And so I grappled for about a year, and it shifted my entire way of how I'm motivated in life. And I got rid of the entire idea of a bucket list of like, oh, I'm motivated to do all these things. And there's 2 things on my bucket list now. And those are one, am I listening for what I'd call the call to adventure? Like, am I deeply listening to where I'm being called to trespass? And two, when I hear that call, do I have the courage to follow it? And that might mean next year I'm working at the coffee shop, and that might mean the year after that I'm writing a book, and that might mean the year after that I adopt 4 dogs, and that might mean, who knows? But those are the two. I'm deeply motivated by a sense of being connected to where I'm intuitively guided to go, and that speaks to tonight. Like, I felt a very Mother Goosey. I've felt that since we met 5-6 years ago. And a couple of months ago, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, I felt really, really deeply called to be like, we need to be in conversation, not even knowing what was going to unfold for you over the next 2 months. And like, thank God, because I needed to be half pantless and crying in the ferry today.
You can always count on some form of tears and nudity.
Yeah.
So
speaking of what we're called to do, we want to get you all books. We want to get them all signed. We want to do so. I think they gave a reminder. We're going to do so relatively quickly. So signings and photos, and maybe not lingering forever and ever, just so that we can get to everybody. So we're going to do that. I think we're going to go fill up on water while you guys get books, everything organized. And if you aren't staying, and if we don't have a chance to interact with you, number one, I'm going to echo Maria's gratitude for us with gratitude for you. It is so nice to come back to in-person, like human to human connection, and move things off of the internet. It's greatly meaningful. And trespass, maybe not through the library tonight, but through yourselves forevermore.
Break into your neighbor's home. Yeah, no, it's I so appreciate, like, I still feel, I said last night and even a little bit tonight, like, I feel a little not super myself, just because I'm a very different person currently than I was when I was doing my book events about a year ago. And so I'm just really grateful that you guys came out. And it's really nice to be back in a space and feel like, yeah, here's some really wonderful people. Here's why I keep puking my guts out to the whole world. So thank you very much for coming. If I don't get to see you individually.
Thanks so much to both of you. Such a wonderful program.